Again, my name is Olivia. I'm happy to have you call me Liv. As Pastor Dave mentioned, I work at the center, and job description-wise, that looks a little bit different every day. Some days I find myself as an artist. Some days I find myself as a community organizer. In the case of this past week, I was a plumber. And on special mornings, I find it meaning that I get to spend time with congregations in our presbytery and know that this is so fun for me, and it's an honor to get to know you in this way. First, hear this retelling of Naaman's healing from 1 Kings. This is from the Olivia Revised Standard Version. Naaman, a powerful commander of the Aramean army, has leprosy, and he's ready to be healed. During a recent conquest in Israel, he's captured a young woman who is now a servant to his wife. This young woman knows someone who can cure him of his leprosy. She tells her master, who tells Naaman, that he can be cured by a holy healer in Israel, a man of God named Elisha. Since Naaman's a pretty important guy, he needs permission from the king before he can up and hit the road. Naaman gets his permission slip signed, and he's loaded up with a great deal of valuables to bring to the king of Israel. When Naaman arrives in Israel, he doesn't go directly to the healer. Instead, he operates kind of within the power structures that he's familiar with. He's sent from one king and goes to another, the king of Israel. This king is upset when he reads the permission letter, and he assumes that Naaman's king must be pulling a prank on him to be asking him to complete such a momentous task, to heal someone with a pretty serious sickness. Upon hearing of the king tearing his clothes out of anger, Elisha, the man of God, the holy healer, says, Naaman, come on over here, I'll cure you. And Elisha wonders, why did you go to the king and not me, the healer? So here's some more drama. When Naaman gets to Elisha's house, with all of his gold and his horses and his servants and his noise, Elisha sends out one of his servants, a messenger. He stays inside of his house, doesn't even go outside. And for a man of Naaman's stature, have a messenger sent out, that's a bit of an insult. The servant delivers Elisha's message saying, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you'll be cleansed. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord, his God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. Aren't the waters back home better and cleaner than any of the waters here? Couldn't I wash in those and be cleansed? With that, he turned and went in a rage. Finally, some of his servants gathered together and said, Master, look, if the holy healer had told you to do something complicated, something difficult, you'd have done that, wouldn't you? Why can't you just do the simple thing and take a bath? Do what you came here to do. Be cured. So he bathed 7 times in the Jordan, and he was cured immediately. Y'all, in some ways this is a pretty wild and wacky text, and it definitely has a pretty intricately woven web of the game telephone. So Naaman's wife's servant has a piece of information, so she tells her, and then she tells Naaman, then Naaman goes to the king, and the king sends him to another king, and the king sends him to Elisha, and Elisha sends out a messenger, and then the servant has to tell Naaman something. It's sort of hard to follow at points. But actually, I think at its bare bones, this is a story we've heard in the Bible before. Someone's sick, and they're ready to be healed. The sick person turns to the Lord, the God of the Israelites, and humbles themselves. The Lord hears the plea, appreciates the humility, and miraculously washes them clean, curing them and offering them new life. Now, surely these stories of healing are a refrain we get over and over again because they do something for our heartstrings. They've got some sort of staying power because these stories tell us tons. Something of God's desire for our flourishing, something of hope, something of the power of the one whom we call God. Of hope. When we ask for something, none of us are beyond healing. of the Creator's desire for our flourishing. When we are healed, we're given access to our innate dignity and all of the sweetness of living. And of God's power, our God is capable of healing ailments of the body, mind, and spirit. And not just that, I think we love these stories because they challenge our understanding of the scope of God's power. God's healing power extends to those who were assumed to be societally out of reach. Really sick people, women, lepers, and in Naaman's case, the commander of an opposing army. So, again, from 10,000 feet, the story is a complicated game of telephone. From 10,000 feet, this story is one about God's abundant ability to provide and ultimately to save Naaman's life. But close up, things always get more complex the closer we get, don't they? Close up, I hear a story that's a commanding challenge to our understanding and expectations of how change takes place. A commanding challenge to our expectations of how change takes place. Friends, this story takes us along with Naaman in his quest for healing, and along the way we discover that real power looks different than what we expected, and oftentimes power is held by people outside of our circles, outside of our expectations, and sometimes it's held by people we forgot to invite to our session meetings. First, who do we expect to set into motion the cure for this powerful man? Surely not a servant, and not a servant woman. We are proven wrong about that. Let's face it, this story and Naaman's life are DOA without the wisdom of the young servant woman. Next, it's clear Naaman's king and Naaman have some expectations about who has the power in Israel to cure him. The king, we'll go to the king. He's a big guy. He'll know just what to do. And we'll bring along gold and silver and all sorts of jewels. Money makes things happen. Wrong again. The king of Israel has no clue what to do with Naaman. In fact, he's even upset that assumptions have been made about how much power he's got command of. All right, fine, not the king. Naaman will go to Elisha, and Elisha will be so impressed by Naaman's loud display of power and his horses and all of his men that he'll be compelled to act. Wrong again. Elisha doesn't need a monetary transaction to compel forth God's grace and God's gift of healing. And finally, for a disease so serious, for a man so powerful, after a journey so long, this life-transforming, life-saving treatment must be something to see. Wrong again. Just take some baths in that river over there. And after all of this, I need to do what now? On Naaman's part, the solution is handed to him, and his pride is nearly his demise. If it weren't for his second servant, a servant accompanying him on his travels, saying, "Hey man, come on. Just do the simple thing and get what you came here for," Naaman might be a lost cause again. This second servant has power too. If power is simply the ability to make something happen, this servant's power rests in the trust he's clearly built up with Naaman. Power to make something happen. So I mentioned earlier that I work for the Center, which is this missional arm of the Presbytery of Baltimore. And my position is a 2-year fellowship funded by the National Office, the Office of the General Assembly. And I'll be here all the way through General Assembly 224, which is taking place next summer here. And all of this makes it sound like I'm a pretty hardcore Presbyterian. Oftentimes people ask which church I'm a pastor at, and if not that, when and where I'll be headed to seminary. I'll be honest with you, I do love church. It's a language I grew up speaking as a kid. I'm the child of a Methodist pastor. I have no problem making myself at home in church, especially the kitchen. There are always snacks. And I do love the warmth of pre-church check-ins with people who I know care about me. And know that this is nothing personal. Church drives me crazy. Church frustrates me to no end sometimes. More often than not, I can't believe I work at church. There are many reasons folks my age aren't necessarily lining up to join a church community. The church's track record regarding diversity and inclusion, its history of colonization and manipulation of minority people, its hesitancy to release tradition for experimentation, these are hard truths that are painful to name and confront as being operative in how we got to where we are now. When we address where the church has fallen short, both in the large format view and in caring for individuals personally, what we're really naming is that the church has long bought into premeditated expectations of how power works, what it looks like, and what sort of bodies are allowed to possess it. And this power problem, these power assumptions that the church has made and has been operating from for hundreds of years, slows us down and sometimes blinds us to the solutions right in our midst. Get in the bath. As I've worked at the center, I've had the honor of walking alongside local congregations as they dream about how to engage in mission. The churches here in this presbytery are never wrestling with the question, should we be serving others? Rather, how do we serve others? And frequently, as churches engage this question, how do we serve our community? I hear a quieter, secondary question being whispered just below that first one. Maybe, if we discern how God is calling us to love and care for our neighbors, how to address that which hurts our communities like poverty and crime and addiction, maybe, just maybe, we as a church community can find our cure too. Now, taking a bold step to be engaged in your community, to encounter mission anew is tough work, and it's only natural for congregations to stumble. More often than not, these power assumptions come right to the surface. We'll get a permission slip from the boss. We'll send our riches. That's the fix. We have a benevolence fund just for this reason. We'll talk to someone in power and they'll fix it. We're smart Presbyterians. Let's work up a book study and then a 12-week plan and then another book study and then maybe a committee. I've been Presbyterian long enough to know that we do love a committee. Sometimes, though, the solution that empowers both our broader community and our local congregation can all but hit us in the face, and we'd say, wait, but isn't our water better? Friends, I believe that if the church is to follow God's call to cross lines of division, if we, the church, are to experience the complete promise of God that we encounter in this wild story, that one of hope, that one of flourishing, that one of unexpected provision, we've got to get in the bath. What does bathing in the Jordan River mean for this church? Who are you in this story, I wonder? Maybe you think of yourself as one of the kings, perhaps with access to structural power. Perhaps you're Naaman, eager to be healed, willing to listen to those wise people who you might otherwise overlook. Perhaps you're Elisha, or maybe you understand yourself as one of the servants, aware that change can happen in some pretty curious ways. Maybe you're eager to have your wisdom heard. Friends, I'll close with a story about the restorative river right in front of one of our local congregations and how they've been choosing to close their eyes and just get in the bath. There is a congregation up north, outside of the city, so in the county, and folks in that area still often rely upon firewood to heat them during the cold seasons. And for years now, this church has been selling firewood as a means to raise some money. And recently, they've discovered that right in front of them, this fundraiser, this selling of firewood, was in fact a ministry. As they deliver really high-quality firewood to oftentimes people who can't afford it, they've taken to spending time with the people who've bought the firewood. They're invited into their homes, and they find that through holding these people's hands and listening to their grief, or laughing with them, or telling stories, God is at work in this sort of wacky firewood fundraiser. They've been able to connect with their community in a way that they didn't know they could, simply by a ministry of time, by a ministry of listening to one another. So friends, I leave you wondering what the bath is for you as an individual. What is the bath for this congregation, and how do we go about finding out? Amen.